Hi everyone, and welcome back to Knot Weave Stitch. My name is Gisela, and this week we are going to be looking at how to choose your first fibre craft. So in today's episode I will be covering 5 key questions to ask yourself when you are first starting a fibre craft. So for the first question, we're going to start out with why. Why do you want to do that particular fibre art? And there's lots of different things that we can think about under this category, so I'll go through them now. So do you want a fibre craft that is for calming purposes? Is it to reduce stress? Is it for mindfulness? Are you looking for something to be calming and repetitive? So for me personally, a big part of my crafting is to reduce my anxiety. I have very bad anxiety. So for me, I want something quite repetitive, something that's not going to be too strenuous and that I can't think of anything else. So that's why I find things like macrame or needle felting quite useful, because in macrame all I can think about is making the knot, counting the knots and keeping on top of it. In needle felting, it's that repetitive motion of the stabbing. So it's maybe things like that you want to think of. So are you doing it for a mindfulness reason, a calming reason? Do you want that repetition? So think about the fibre arts that might be quite useful in that. So for me, it's the needle felting and the macrame. It might be knitting or crochet, kind of repeating the same stitches over and over again. That might be something quite relaxing for you. If you're not maybe doing it for the mindfulness side of it or the calming side, are you craving creative expression? Do you want to maybe try something a little bit different? Do you want to make gifts, clothing, home decor? Are you wanting to do this for yourself as a hobby? Or are you wanting to do this more as a small business? So by selling your items either in a market stall or by selling them online perhaps. Either way, as a hobby or as a business, what do you want to make? Do you want to make gifts? Do you want to make clothing, home decor, jewellery, whatever it may be? There might be something in particular that you would particularly like to make. So that's maybe something to also think about for why do you want to do this particular fibre craft. Or are you just interested in learning a new skill or a new art form? It might be just trying something different. You might have already done, let's say, knitting and you'd like to try crochet instead. You might have already tried most of the fibre arts, but there might be one or two, let's say, macrame that you haven't tried yet. So think about these questions under the why category. Why do you want to do that fibre art? Question number 2 to think about is, what are the most beginner-friendly fibre arts? Now, this is probably be down to personal opinion. My opinion might be very different to someone else's here, but we'll go through a few different fibre arts and think about the pros and cons for them. So starting with embroidery, it's quite low cost to start off with. You're looking at the needles, the threads, and the cloths to sew onto there. And it's a lovely, peaceful, very quiet, very artistic one to start off with. So if you're looking for something peaceful, quite small craft, then that is one to maybe take a look at. One of the negative sides perhaps is that it is usually quite small work. So if you wanted to make much larger statement pieces, then that would probably take you a much longer time. Since you're working with a needle and thread, it will take a long time to make a much larger piece. So if you're looking for much more of a statement piece or a much larger wall hanging, whatever it may be, then embroidery might not be the one to get started in. Macrame is the opposite to that. So if you want really bold statement pieces, particularly if you want larger wall hangings, things like even egg chairs or hammocks, you can make much larger pieces out of macrame. It still does take a while, But with that, it's much easier to do, much quicker, because you can work with much thicker cord, such as rope or paracord, and then that will reduce the amount of time that you need to be able to make that much larger piece there. With macrame, it's quite decorative. A lot of it is for home decor, so wall hangings, plant pot holders, garlands, but it can also be quite useful as well. So you can make functional things. It's not always just decorative pieces. You can do coasters and placemats, bags, things like that. So you can do functional things as well as artistic things with macrame. Personally, I think the downside with macrame is that if you're wanting to work on a small scale, it can be a lot more difficult. So let's say if you wanted to make a very fine small bracelet or little earrings, it can be quite difficult as a beginner, because when you're working with very fine yarns, very thin jewellery cord or very thin thread in macrame, it can be quite difficult because you can get quite tangled easily and you don't see the knots anywhere near as well as you would with cord or rope. So if you do want to start in macrame, I would probably recommend doing a medium to slightly bigger project, and then once you feel a lot more confident, then you can always work down to a lot smaller. So with the next two crafts that I will be suggesting, I don't have much of an experience with it. I have tried both of them and I can say quite honestly I am not great whatsoever, so take this with a bit of a pinch of salt here. But hearing experiences from other people and having a little dip in with my toes with this as well, these are my opinions here. Knitting can be absolutely great for wearables, so scarves, gloves, great for baby clothes, all sorts of things. So a lot of the time you will see that in terms of wearables. A very cozy, rhythmic type of craft there. I just kind of imagine myself in a cozy chair in front of a fire doing some knitting. It would be absolutely perfect. So if you're looking for something quite cozy and you're looking to make wearables, knitting would be fantastic with that. So potentially the downside with knitting, particularly for me, I find the initial technique quite difficult to get into there, and particularly finding the right kind of tension, not being too tight or too loose with my stitches, quite difficult. So that's just me personally, but that might be a general thing there. I'm not too sure because, like I said, I haven't had that much of a go with knitting. So that might be something that might be a little bit tricky. That might be the potential downside to start off with knitting. Crochet, I've heard, is quicker than knitting. It's potentially easier to fix mistakes. Again, this is just from what I've heard. I am no expert in crochet, so take that with a pinch of salt there. But crochet can be very versatile in what you can make there. So from stuffed plushies, again, to wearables, to decorative pieces. I've seen some lovely crocheted wreaths made, so that might be a lot more versatile in what you can do with it. But again, similar to knitting, I can say for myself that again, I found the initial techniques, getting used to the crochet hook, a little bit tricky, and again, trying to be consistent with my tension, I found difficult. So again, not being too tight with it and not being too loose in my stitches. But with both knitting and crochet, take what I say with a pinch of salt because I don't have too much experience in those areas. But it's something to maybe research and something to have a little think about. Needle felting, you don't need much to get started with. So usually you would have the needle felt needle, you would have some form of wool like roving wool, and then usually a base, so something like a brush mat or a cushion underneath to protect your needle. So not very much that you need to get started with, but depending on the wool and the amount of wool that you get through, it can get a little bit more expensive. With needle felting, that is again quite a nice mindful one because it's that same repetitive stabbing motion there. However, it can take a long time. So with needle felting, a lot of the time it's smaller pieces. If you do want to work on larger pieces, it is possible, but again, it will take a much longer time. With needle felting, when you get a little bit more advanced, it goes into armature, which is with the wire structure underneath, and that will make 3D sculptures, but again, that will take far longer. So needle felting, a lot of the time I would say, is better if you want to work on a smaller scale. So let's say if you're making maybe a brooch or a necklace, something like that, that's a good starting point there, because usually the smaller projects are easier, will be a lot quicker than trying to work on a much larger scale with needle felting. And lastly, weaving. Weaving is great for the textural and expressive side, particularly if you want to do maybe a little bit more abstract. That can be quite nice there. And if you're wanting to work with different materials, or potentially recycling your materials, weaving can be fantastic for that. The downsides to weaving is it can be a bit more of a setup depending on the type of loom that you want, because there are all sorts of different types and sizes of looms, and it can get a bit more expensive because you're looking at the loom, you are looking at all the accessories that potentially come with it. So let's say the needle there, the shuttle, your different wools. You might need a range of wools, you might need a range of yarns, whatever it may be. So it can start racking up a little bit more in loom weaving. But again, you can work with just a lap or a small tabletop one. You don't need to go for the much bigger loom if you don't want to, but sometimes loom weaving can be a little bit more on the expensive side. You might also find that tension again can be another issue in weaving when you first get started. So to make sure that you've got kind of consistent tension, you don't want to be pulling too much and you don't want it too loose as well. So that's maybe something to think about in weaving. Now, there are so many other fibre arts. I could sit here all day and go through all of the different categories there, but that's just a nice selection to maybe get started with, or maybe to think about and research. But there are plenty more, i.e. punch needling, that you can look into as well. So that's not the entire list there, but just a little selection to get you thinking and maybe researching into them. Question number 3, consider your budget and time. Which crafts are cheapest to start? So again, I would have a little research and see all the different tools that you would need, the different yarns or fibres, wools, whatever it may be, how much that's going to start adding up there. So you could always do a list and compare the different crafts and see what potentially is the cheaper option or what is a bit more of an investment. Which fibre art requires lots of tools? So some are very few that you might need. So potentially in knitting and crochet, you've got your needles, your knitting needles or your crochet hook, and then you have your yarn to work with. Or something like in macrame, a lot of the time it is just the cord on its own, or a cord and one wooden dowel, or a cord and a keyring. So those ones are usually less in terms of the tools that you would need, but others require maybe a little bit more. So like I said earlier, so with weaving you're looking at different looms, you're looking at the accessories, the yarns, the fibres, the wools that you would like to use in your weaving. So it can soon add up. Also, if you are doing sewing, you're looking at a sewing machine and all of the different accessories that come with that. So that can soon add up as well. So again, we touched on this a little bit earlier, but in terms of time, what can you make progress on in short sessions? What takes a longer amount of time? What's a longer amount of investment in terms of timing with fibre arts? So some projects or some fibre arts you can do relatively quickly. So especially some of the smaller scale ones. So let's say if you are doing a little keychain or something like that in macrame. That can be a lot quicker than if you are making a huge blanket in crochet, and that's a much longer time investment there. So think about, do you want little quick projects that you want to do? Do you have a very busy life? Are you going to kind of schedule it around your busy life there and only have short sessions that you can do? Or do you have a lot more free time? Maybe you're retired, or maybe you work part-time, so you've got a few more hours available to do much larger projects. So think about your budget and time there and what works in your life, because we all have very different situations. So think about your own situation and what your budget and time would be. Question number 4, how do you learn best? Are you a visual learner? You could try YouTube tutorials to give a craft a go, or maybe you need to see someone in person doing that craft. So for some people, they're very much a visual learner. Do you prefer learning in person, or would you rather do it online? That can be quite a big difference there. You might want someone available, a teacher or a short course in that craft to help you along. So if you do have any questions or make a mistake or need any extra help, you've got that teacher to guide you along. Rather than in YouTube videos, that is usually cheaper. Most of the time it's free and you can see that immediately, see how it's done. But if you do have any questions, or if you're struggling a little bit, it can be a bit more tricky to get some guidance on YouTube videos. So there's pros and cons to both there. Do you like structure? So are you looking for a beginner all-in-one kits? Or do you want regular classes? Or do you want that face-to-face interaction and be part of a community? So that might be something to think about. How do you learn best? Do you learn best alone? Do you learn best in a group? Start thinking along those lines and do a little bit of research. In structure as well, you could look at patterns or books. If you want to follow the exact step-by-steps, you might be a person that likes to read the instructions and see the accompanying images. So maybe looking at patterns or step-by-step guides can be quite helpful if that's the way that you learn best. And lastly, question number 5, where can you try before committing? So it can be intimidating and you might not want to do the whole investment into that craft if you're not sure if you're going to like it or not. So you could look at local craft shops, community groups. It can be quite nice, particularly if you want that in-person aspect. You could do a little course or workshop in person, or get together with a community group like a natter and knit kind of group there. There might be all sorts of things like that. So if you want more of a community side, that in-person side, you could always join an in-person group or workshop. If not, you can also look online. So like I said before, you could have a look at YouTube videos. Sometimes there are free or paid for online sessions. So again, if you wanted a little bit more of a helping hand, you could do an online workshop with a teacher so you can see what they're doing and ask the questions. Or if you just want to follow a YouTube video, you could do that instead. So if you'd rather do the online version, if you don't need to be in person, you could look at that rather than going in person to a group or a workshop. You could also look at free patterns. Sometimes there are free patterns online, or sometimes free patterns in shops there. So you could have a look at that, or maybe give that a little try and see if that works for you. If you like that fibre art, by doing that small project first, trying that free pattern first, that might be something that you could have a look at. Or even talking to friends and family that are potentially into that craft. So you could maybe craft along with them, borrow some of their tools or supplies, or ask for help and advice with them. can also be maybe quite a nice activity to do together. So you might like that kind of support system with someone you trust, with your friends and family. So that's something that you can think about in terms of where you can try before committing to that craft. But when you do start a new craft, yes, it can be scary, and that is completely normal. That is fine. We all expect too much of ourselves sometimes, so set expectations and avoid perfectionism. And I speak as a perfectionist myself. It can be very, very difficult to set expectations when you want to be an absolute pro to start off with, but no one ever is. Yes, some people are naturally gifted in certain crafts, but a lot of the time, we are all just beginners to start off with. Most people, they've taken weeks, months, years to get to that point. So please don't be too hard on yourself. Your first project doesn't have to be a masterpiece. Your first project does not need to be perfect. I always say it's better to make those mistakes. You won't learn if you don't make the mistakes. It's all well and good if it's going perfectly, but let's say you make a mistake in the future, you then don't know how to fix it. So make the mistake, either try and figure it out yourself, go online, Google, find some help, look at YouTube videos, ask someone who does that craft who may know how to fix it, join a workshop, ask the questions there. Don't be afraid to ask for help, because making the mistakes is a big part of it. It will really, really help your confidence. And that is one of the biggest things for myself. I hate making mistakes. I want it to be perfect the whole time. But the only way that I've felt very, very confident in my craft is after I've made the mistake, figuring out how to fix it. And a lot of the time I've either had to learn it myself, try and figure it out myself, or I've looked at a YouTube video, or I've gone on a course, and then that has helped me being able to fix the issue. And then from there on, I know how to fix the problem. I can identify the problem. I then know how to fix it, and then I can just carry on with the piece there. So it doesn't have to be perfect, and a lot of the time I encourage just going for it, make the mistake and learn from your mistakes. That's the way that we learn and grow there. So please don't feel like it needs to be perfect on the first try, because otherwise you're just setting yourself up for disappointment. And focus on what the feeling it's giving you. Are you feeling happy? Are you feeling relaxed? Are you feeling calm when you're doing that craft? You don't want to be doing a craft that you just dread the whole time, that's stressing you out. Yes, for all crafts, there will be a point that it does stress you out, especially when you've been doing it for 7, 8, 9 hours and it's really getting on your nerves. There will always be an element of that, but you don't want a craft, even with an easy project, where it's just annoying you, or you're not interested, you're bored. If you're bored throughout the entire thing, then maybe something's not quite right there. Yes, you might get bored after a while because you're having to do the same thing over and over again. But at the end of the day, if afterwards you really actually enjoy the process, or you're so happy with what you've achieved, then that might be okay. But you want to think about the feeling that it is giving you. So if you love what you do, if you're enjoying it, if it brings you a sense of calm, if you love the final outcome, then you're probably on the right track there. If not, if you're not enjoying it, if it's not something for you, if it makes you very stressed, if it makes you very angry, if it bores you to tears, then maybe try another craft. There's no one right craft, so I would very much recommend going and trying lots of different crafts. Dip your toes into it and see what you like. I think there's a craft out there for everyone. So if you tried knitting and it's not for you, maybe try crochet. Or if you have tried knitting and crochet and they're both not for you, like it isn't for me, I really wish that I could get into knitting and crochet. It's absolutely stunning, but I struggle with it. So instead, I had a go with macrame, and I found that that was much more my speed. So it's finding the one that works for you, and it might take a while to get there, but try a few different ones. have a maybe look at some videos, have a go at maybe a couple of workshops, dip your toes in, and then normally you will find the one that works for you. Or it might even be a selection. Like for me, there's a selection of fibre arts that I really enjoy. It might just be one particular one. So have a little go at a few of them, try them, and you can then always switch it up later on. You have to think of crafting as a journey. It's not a decision you're stuck on with forever. So like I just said, if it's the craft that you don't like, change it. Have a go at another one. See if you prefer that. If you like the craft but you're stuck on the project, change it. Have a little go. If you don't like doing a big project, work smaller. If the smaller ones are too intricate and too difficult, work larger, work with different materials. There's always ways that you can tweak it, that you can change it up to make it apply to you or to make sure that you're enjoying it. It's not a hard and fast rule for absolutely everything. You can really make it your own. So I hope that episode was really useful on how to choose your fibre craft. Next week's episode, we will be looking at craft spaces and storage solutions. If you can, please subscribe to my podcast. I would be so grateful. Additionally, I have a Patreon with different tiered memberships, so please do consider joining the Knot Weave Stitch community, as it really helps keep the podcast alive. I also have an accompanying podcast blog on my website, which is www.giselamartin.com, which follows each episode, so feel free to take a little look at that. Thank you so much for listening to this episode, and I will see you in the next one.